There's a few new Nintendo Switch 2 updates I want to cover with you all today, starting with a closure to a service for Nintendo Switch Online members that has been around for a while, and you may or may not have been taking advantage of this, but the game voucher program that Nintendo implemented, where you can essentially buy two $60 games is the average price, but also in some cases, like Tears of the Kingdom being a $70 game, you can essentially buy a $100 voucher to get 2 games. That means that instead of paying $70 and $60, potentially $130 combined cost, you could save that $30, or in most cases $20. Well, we knew this was coming to a close. We now have an exact date, and I want to update you all with exactly what's going on with that situation. Then we also have quite a few new pieces of information to go over in relation to Donkey Kong Bananza, because there was a detailed interview with developers that went up on IGN, and we now know who's producing the game, who's directing it, and I want to revisit how this ties into that rumor around whether or not this is an Odyssey spin-off team or the actual legit Odyssey team, and what that really means for 3D Mario in terms of how long we might be waiting for it. Then we also have kind of a warning for Donkey Kong Bananza, because it appears that the physical copies are out in the wild already. And while I don't think the damage is going to be as widespread as it once was in the Switch generation, and there's a reason for that, it's still going to go into spoiler warning territory online nonetheless. Then there's kind of an interesting warning floating around for people who are buying used games right now and potentially popping them in their Switch 2. Although it does not sound like the end of the world if it's something that does happen to you, but an extra hoop you may have to jump through. And then finally, Nintendo's fighting back against piracy big time nowadays, and the latest headline is that the FBI is taking down one of the biggest Nintendo Switch piracy related websites. But we'll get on the same page with all of this info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick off this conversation right over at VGC, where you can see the following article, which outlines Nintendo is ending the Nintendo Switch game voucher service. Customers will have 1 year to redeem their game vouchers. And you have here, the service will conclude on January 30th, 2026, after which time it will no longer be possible to purchase the popular vouchers. Nintendo Switch game vouchers will allow players to pay a lump sum for multiple game vouchers at once, which would result in the games they redeemed them against being cheaper. For example, currently a player could purchase 2 Nintendo Switch game vouchers for $99.98. They could then redeem those vouchers for 2 games which cost $59.99, such as Super Mario Party Jamboree or Mario and Luigi Brothership, a $20 savings. Nintendo has confirmed that the unused vouchers will expire 12 months after the original date of purchase. Nintendo hasn't said if it plans to introduce a new service that will also feature Nintendo Switch 2 titles. According to Nintendo, game vouchers remain valid for 12 months from purchase. For example, if set of Nintendo Switch game vouchers is purchased on January 30th, 2026, each Nintendo Switch game voucher remains valid until January 30th, 2027. So if you choose to buy this on the very last day it's available, that is your cutoff date before you can not essentially lose your money that you spent on those vouchers. Now, the library of this obviously was something that was just an extra benefit for first-party Nintendo titles, for NSO members, and it was a way to basically get full-price games that don't typically we go on sale, or that we always see sales for, at a cheaper rate. And so, yeah, this is one of those things that until Nintendo announces some kind of replacement program for it, and they may not, it's just one less benefit we have added to the pool. And so maybe if you don't buy digital, this doesn't affect you at all. I do think that whenever there's a couple cool games coming out, especially now that we're talking about the Switch 2 generation and the price point around $70 for each title, it would have been cool to see this just get revamped to some level, and maybe the ability to mix and match Switch 1 and Switch 2 games. As I mentioned, you would get stuff like Tears of the Kingdom, a $70 Switch 1 game, as an option in the lineup of games, and then you get that and a $60 game, and you actually saved $30 between your 2 purchases. And I'm kind of surprised, because I do think that Nintendo wants to incentivize players to basically buy from their own eShop. And this was kind of a program that people who buy digitally primarily were likely taking advantage of, especially if you knew within 6 months time or less that there were 2 games that you definitely might want to pick up. You buy a game voucher for $99, you make sure you save your $20 minimum on each of those. Clearly, with the new kind of standard first-party Nintendo game being $69.99, and then, you know, those special games like Mario Kart World being $79.99, they may have had to raise the price of the game voucher, but I am surprised that they're just taking it away with no kind of announcement of a replacement program. Yet to see any kind of Nintendo Selects type of announcement for the Switch generation of games. I don't necessarily think that's coming anytime soon. If at all, I mean, we might just be in an era now where Nintendo realizes their titles stay evergreen for so long and they continue to sell at a $60 price point that they just keep them there outside of those rare sales we see, which is why I will always cover those on the channel when they pop up, especially from a first party perspective, because yeah, these Nintendo games come out at $60 in the Switch generation. They just stayed there at $60 the entire generation, and it takes a sale to get them discounted under that. And now that looks to be the case once again in the Switch 2 generation, and it's a $70 price point and or $80 for select big titles. So buckle up, gaming's getting expensive, and this is just one of those member benefits that is going away, but you do have until the end of January to do that. This could also signal something of a conversation or an idea that Switch 1 software will probably start to drastically ramp down past January of 2026. Basically, like, maybe we're not going to see first party Nintendo Switch supported games past that date, or at least, you know, more than a couple a year or something like that. I do think that by that date, it makes sense. It's almost a full 9-year life cycle at that point in time in January of 2026. So yeah, it seems like that would probably be the case, and maybe Nintendo announces something for the Switch 2 generation with this. Maybe they don't. Okay, moving on from there, we have quite a few different Donkey Kong Bonanza updates to go over today, one of which having to do with the development of when this game actually started, and it's on the Switch 1, but also more than that, we have kind of the who's involved by name, and that may spell some hope for people who are still hoping for the next 3D Mario to not be years and years off, which I don't think it is, but we'll break all of that down. First up, you have here Donkey Kong Bonanza began development on the original Nintendo Switch before moving to Switch 2. The game's focus on voxel technology and destruction prompted the move to Switch 2. The game, which is released later this month, began on Nintendo's previous console, but as the game's producer and director have now explained, technical limitations imposed by the first system made the transition to Nintendo's new console a natural one. So this game originally began its development cycle on the Switch 1, and at the time we were still using voxel technology and thinking lots of different ideas for applications, producer Kenta Matakura told IGN. But when we learned about the Switch 2 development, we realized that the best implementation of these ideas and technology would be on Nintendo Switch 2. The game's director, Kazuya Takahashi, also weighed in on the platform. I was previously talking about the importance of the continuity of destruction, which was something that we could expand on and have longer continuous play experience with that kind of concept on Nintendo Switch 2. So this allowed us to engage in creating really extremely rich variety of materials and very large scale changes in the environment on that new hardware. And when destruction is your core gameplay, one really important moment that we wanted to preserve was when a player looks at part of the terrain and thinks, can I break this? Because that creates a very important surprise that has a lot of impact for them, and that was something that was best done on Switch 2. So what's interesting that you might realize is that Mario Kart World originally started off development on the Switch 1, and Donkey Kong Bonanza also originally started off development on the Switch 1. Donkey Kong Bonanza sounds like earlier into the scope of the project, they realized they need Switch 2's power for the destruction capabilities they wanted to go along with this game, but we saw similar things from the development team on Mario Kart World. I think it's pretty clear that at Nintendo, with them having such a long life cycle of the Nintendo Switch and the original and the hardware, the power level that it was, a lot of developers started to outgrow the vision of what that console could kind of handle. And so when you see all of the different destructive elements of Donkey Kong Bonanza, it was just clearly something that wasn't going to be able to really run smooth or even at all potentially on the original Switch hardware. So it's interesting to kind of think about maybe when this game started development, and you might remember there were rumors of a 3D Donkey Kong game being in development for the original Switch. Those seem to have checked out, you know, in the background now. But of course, we don't have any kind of hard date from Nintendo on when they started for sure. But this next part may kind of answer a little bit of that question, and also kind of what's going on with the development team behind Donkey Kong Bonanza. So you have this next headline from VGC also, which outlines Super Mario Odyssey's director is a producer on Donkey Kong Bonanza. The game is being directed by Kazuya Takahashi, who joined Nintendo in 2020. So that is the director of the game. Kenta Matakura, who was the director of Super Mario Odyssey, has been revealed as one of the game's producers. Donkey Kong Bonanza is being directed by Kazuya Takahashi. Takahashi joined Nintendo in 2020, having previously worked on other open-world titles. He told IGN in an interview that his previous work gives him some interesting experience that he carries on to Bonanza. While the exact number of developers that worked on both Super Mario Odyssey and the upcoming game wasn't revealed, Takahashi said that due to a lot of the staff crossover between the games, both Odyssey and Bonanza share narrative similarities. Certainly because a lot of the team members who also worked on Super Mario Odyssey, there are also some similarities in terms of how they think about the settings of the characters for both games, but it's something we really can't explain all of for now because we need to leave something for people to consider as they're playing the game. There's also some talk here about maybe the fact that Pauline is 13 plays into some lore of this game, and this could be in the realm of speculation that it's like a prequel in the Mario Odyssey timeline somewhere. We definitely know that part of the Odyssey team is definitely developing this, but you might remember a source we covered, Reese Kiwi Talks Riley, who was interviewed on years and years for YouTube, numerous different developers, and they were putting out the statement that basically, yes, the Odyssey team is involved, but it's a spin-off team from the main team that developed Odyssey, and that essentially 3D Mario fans shouldn't have to worry about waiting too long because the fear became, well, hang on, if Donkey Kong Bonanza is barely launching on the Switch 2 and it's done by the Odyssey team, and presumably it hasn't been done for that long, are we 4 or 5 years out potentially from the next 3D Mario game? And the claim from Kiwi Talks was that, no, don't worry, this is a spin-off team. And this does seem to kind of back up his previous claim, and he actually doubled down on it, as he put out over on Twitter where he says, more and more info is coming out suggesting I was right regarding the split from the Odyssey team. I very rarely provide inside reporting. I'm a game developer interview prominently, so if I provide intel, I will not do it unless I'm hugely confident I am right. I spent years building up my reputation and building rapport with devs, and I wouldn't throw it all away on some baseless rumors for clout. That's just dumb. 3D Mario fans need not worry, it's coming, so just relax and enjoy other games in the interim. You might also remember we had a lot of gaming journalists putting out ideas that 3D Mario was going to be close near the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, and a lot of people just assumed the launch game, even though we then started to see some rumors that suggested it would be a Mario Kart game as opposed to the 3D Mario game, which ended up checking out. But I don't think this means that because Bonanza is the big 3D platformer from part of the Odyssey team, that doesn't mean that Nintendo couldn't have put a lot of the younger minds behind this in a spin-off game, like what Kiwi Talks is suggesting. And then they also have some heads from the Odyssey team totally directing and behind the development of the next 3D Mario. I don't know if it'll be as soon as 2026, but I do think that that's on the table as a possibility. Maybe the big holiday game of 2026 would be 3D Mario, but I don't think we're going to have to wait too much longer than that. If it goes any later than 2027, I personally will be very surprised to see that kind of a gap in a 3D Mario mainline release. But nonetheless, we now kind of know some more of the studio heads that are behind this, and this person was brought into the company that's the director in 2020. So he could have been hired for this job, presumably, which also means that maybe 2020 is the time that Donkey Kong Bonanza was originally under development. It spent the development cycle a year or two into it being developed for the Switch 1, and then it moved to the Switch 2, and here we are now looking at it almost launching in July of 2025. On the last note of Donkey Kong Bonanza updates, just be careful out there. You can see this circulating around on Reddit where it says, I'm a good person, I'm a good person. Somebody snapped a snapshot of essentially all the retail packaging of Donkey Kong Bonanza. These ship out to retailers early. People get the idea to try to sneak one of these things home, go ahead and play it, and then next thing you know, you could potentially be looking at some very hefty story spoilers and or endings of the game that you don't want to be spoiled about. So just kind of watch out for that. I don't think this is going to be near as widespread as what we saw happen in the Nintendo Switch generation, because there were widespread emulators for that and easily ways to dump your game and share them online, which caused basically thousands and thousands of people to be able to download the game early, at which point you would have a lot more coverage of it online. In this case, if somebody could presumably take this cartridge home, play it early, and share their footage online, but it may not have the same kind of widespread effect as we saw it in the Switch 1 generation. But yes, we are back to worrying about getting games spoiled before they're officially out due to the nature of the retail cartridge. Okay, so from here we have Nintendo Switch 2 owner was banned for playing secondhand Switch 1 games. Yes, this is a reality, but not the end of the world, so stick with me here. Nintendo's flagging system apparently went into overdrive the other day as Nintendo Switch 2 owner purchased a number of secondhand Nintendo Switch games from Facebook Marketplace was banned. It was not clear how the error happened, but the user said on Reddit that he inserted each game one by one to get updates to download before going to sleep. He then received a message the next day to say his access to online services were restricted. Thankfully, he was able to contact Nintendo support, who were helpful and asked to see the listing for him and snap photos of the games that they were able to unban him. So that's the big thing. He did have to contact Nintendo support, but he actually praised the fact that it was a seamless process and he was able to chat with somebody pretty quickly. And then the proof that they wanted was pictures of the physical games that he had to make sure these weren't pirated copies, essentially, because with things like the MIG Switch dumper out there, now having a Switch cart available for the Nintendo Switch, you could obviously dump all your games, go sell them on the marketplace. You're still playing those with a unique code, then somebody else gets the used games, they're popping them in trying to play them, and now Nintendo sees that the same unique code for that physical game is being used in two different systems, causing a immediate online ban of the Switch 2. If that were to happen to you for any reason, just remember you can contact Nintendo support, you can chat with them, provide picture proof that you actually have the cartridges in hand, and they will unban your console. So this was a online console level ban, not something like the entire console bricked or anything like that, but just disabling the online services. But after a quick chat with Nintendo support, seems like they got them fixed up. And yeah, the reseller market, a little bit dicey with Switch 1 games because of the MIG Switch. Right now, that's really not a worry for Switch 2 exclusive games, but Switch 1 used games, this could potentially happen. And if it does, just keep that in the back of your mind. Nintendo support should be able to fix it up. Okay, lastly, to close this out here, we have FBI takes down big Nintendo Switch piracy site. So today it was revealed that the FBI has taken down NSW2U, a website connected with piracy on Nintendo Switch. NSW2U housed plenty of ROMs for games on the console. If you had a hacked Nintendo Switch or a working PC emulator, some could download content from the site and play those titles without legally purchasing them. The FBI went after the website in accordance with the seizure warrant issued pursuant I'm just going to skip that part, by the United States District Court of the Northern District of Georgia as part of law enforcement operation and action by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This notice is provided when attempting to access NSW2U. Dutch agency FIOD was also involved in the takedown. So obviously they point out here, Nintendo during the Switch era really ramped things up, actually going after Switch emulators directly like Yuzu and Ryujinx. You probably remember all that stuff when it happened. Nintendo does not like piracy, obviously. It takes money directly from their bottom line. And listen, I don't have any problems with anybody that chooses to do what you want to do. But if you obviously buy the game and then you back it up, that's one thing. Buy the game and you're playing it via emulation, no problems. But if you're just straight up not supporting the devs and the hard work that goes into these games and just pirating everything online, yeah, Nintendo's trying to do what they can to shut that kind of stuff down, because clearly they're a for-profit company at the end of the day. People work hard, salaries go into the game development that is out there, and everybody can have their opinion on what price points look like and if they're fair or not, but at the end of the day, just straight up stealing a copy of a game online, not the ideal thing to do. And Nintendo's just kind of, I guess, getting FBI involved to potentially go after these things and just get them shut down altogether. So we'll see if a big list of names pop up as a in-court type of, example thing from this. But for now, the website's down and looks like one of those hubs to kind of get Switch 1 pirated games easily is not accessible anymore. But let me know your take on all the different stories we covered here today. What do you think about the game voucher service completely being discontinued and going away as of the end of January of 2026? Where's your hype levels for Donkey Kong Bonanza as we inch closer to its release? What do you think about the likelihood of 3D Mario being really far off and or maybe closer than we realize? What's your take on that? Switch 1 used games being a part of Switch 2 console bans, does that make you worried at all? And what's your take on Nintendo and these piracy shutdown websites with FBI involved? So Make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.